I'm going to kick this off. Looks like we got quite a few people in here. It's 4:03. So what I'm going to first show you is just our elite benefits and our partnership with Bushnell. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and walk you through what it would look like as an onX Hunt Elite member to go take advantage of this great offer from Bushnell. So if you go to our main website, onxmaps.com, and then if you just click on onX Hunt at the top, or you can click on the Hunt device shell right here, it's going to bring you to the Hunt homepage. And then from there, you see this elite membership up towards the top of the screen. And that's where you're going to want to go to find all of our elite benefits. And so as an onX Hunt Elite member, you have access to all of these different discounts, and some of them are even free services. So as you scroll through here, in case you need a boots, maybe you need some backcountry meals for a Western hunt, maybe you need a tree stand. But Bushnell is right down here. And so when you go in here, if you're an onX Hunt Elite member, you can use this little spot to log in with your elite membership. And so I'm just going to use a fake email that I created that has an elite membership attached to it. I'm going to log in and bam, I have the ability to get this elite benefit. And as you'll see, 25% off cell cams and 3 months of free unlimited data. And so if you take advantage of this offer, now you're going to have data all the way through mid-December. And so that in and of itself is going to be $45 of savings with the 3 months of free data, plus 25% off the cell cams. Lake, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think 25% off one of those Cellucor 20s puts that camera right at about $100.
Yeah, no, you're correct, which is pretty ridiculous for a cell camera these days.
Yeah, and I'm currently running, I think 3 or 4 of these Cellucor 20s, and I put some of them out. I put all of them out in August, and they still have, all of them have over 80% battery still. I get, somewhere between 5 and 50 photos a day, so I don't have crazy activity on my cameras, but enough that I'm getting pictures every day, and the battery life has been incredible. The ability to request high-res images with that unlimited data subscription is awesome. So if you're not already an onX Hunt Elite member, go check it out. Follow the flow on our webpage to come over to Bushnell. And this deal is only good through October 16th. So if you're in the market to buy a new cell cam, check out our onX Hunt Elite membership and check out Bushnell. And so with that, I'll kick it over to Lake, and we'll kind of start to break down how we utilize onX and how we use trail cameras to put ourselves on more mature bucks each fall.
Sure. So Jared and I's kind of plan, and again, as far as I get too far ahead of myself, if you have, something in that you want to ask in the Q&A, don't hesitate to do it. We'll stay around for questions after. But Jared and I's plan, more or less, was to talk about different strategies that we use we're both in very different regions. I'm down here in the Southeast. My trail camera tactics are a lot different than the things that Jared would do as far as how I implement those and how I implement the map. And so with that, I'm going to go kick it over and share my screen where I have a map pulled up. Let's see, there we go. That working? Can y'all see that map?
We're seeing it.
Cool. So to break it down first, obviously, if you look at this is a piece of ground in Arkansas that I actually used to hunt with Primos. So if y'all ever heard of cottonmouth, that's probably may look familiar to some of y'all. But kind of way to go at it first is, I guess, strictly from a southeast standpoint. Baiting laws have changed a lot in the past, 4 or 5 years. And where you run into that, you also have, along with baiting, food sources, food plots. And so those are always going to be like super obvious places to put a trail camera, right? So if we'll look at just a few of them here, like that's a food plot that you can see right there. That's one place that we called the secret patch. There was always an island, a tree out there. We'd put a trail camera out there, leave it on like a field scan or a time lapse kind of mode. It always served well. This was a huge ag field, and we would have, like, I was being kind of underestimating the trail cameras we would have spread around this thing, but kind of the same deal. You would have kind of like these main areas where you would always have a trail camera. And then if you mix in, like if you live in a state that allows baiting or salt licks, even things like that, that's places where you could more or less have a trail camera year round. But what I'm mainly focusing on with what I've laid out here is mainly strategies that you can use throughout the season, because I firmly believe, even, and this goes across the board, whether you're in a state that allows baiting or not, or whether you have food plots, doesn't matter. If you're not actively, moving your trail cameras throughout the season to reflect what the deer are doing, then you're going to miss some deer. Even if you're on, a property that has, feeders everywhere, there's some bucks that are not going to come to those feeders. And so there's strategies that you can employ to pick up on some of those, and quite frankly, better your success rates. And so here's like an obvious one that I'm talking about here. Down here in the South, it's a lot flatter, especially the spot in Arkansas that I'm looking at. It's in the Delta, so it doesn't get any flatter than that. And so when you talk about finding pinch points and funnels rather than terrain features, you're looking at vegetation or landmarks, things that are going to funnel those deer automatically. So this was one of the most obvious spots that we ever found while we were there, but it worked like a charm. We called this land between the lakes because you have a big lake there, and then you have these two there. And so if you look at this area on kind of a grand scale view, you got just this small strip of timber that when you had deer traveling from here or from up here, they would always use this stretch of timber. And so we would always have a trail camera in here. We always hunt in here a lot, and we picked up all kinds of bucks from doing that. And this spot right here, during the rut down there, was absolutely insane because you had food sources on the north and the south. And so you constantly have bucks running through that strip of timber. Same here on a more micro level, but pinch points such as this, like, some of these would change without, throughout the year, depending on rain levels. But when both of these bodies of water had water in them, this was a super hot spot to catch deer traveling through.
So I'm going to jump in here, Lake, because you're showing some things that relate to Jeremy Lopez's question, at least in my mind. Sounds like he's up in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, very little ag, a lot of big timber. And you found the exact situation that I utilize when I hunted northern Wisconsin. Oftentimes there's a lot of lakes or small bodies of water that create these very natural pinch points. And so, Jeremy, that'd be one spot that I would definitely look to when you're out putting boots on the ground scouting, is find some of those pieces of water that are going to force movement in between two ponds, or maybe there's a ridge with a pond on the downslope side of it. Find those natural occurring funnels and pinch point areas to hang your trail cameras, rather than just a trail or maybe an old scrape like you've been trying. I'd definitely look for that. And then the other thing that jumps out here, Lake, is you should flip on the tree species layers. Because from what I can see on your map, pretty much all of your trail cameras are very near to some type of habitat diversity, which is something our good buddies at the Hunting Public really harp on, is finding habitat diversity, whether that is an edge of coniferous and deciduous trees, or like you're between the lake spot, you got water right there against the timber. Anywhere where you can find multiple types of habitat that meet in a spot, that's going to be an area that I'm interested in, regardless the time of year, because deer are edge critters. They use edges. And so, like, as you see with the tree species layer here, I think Lake just flipped on the oak trees there. But there's layers for deciduous versus coniferous. You can get really granular with particular tree types that you're looking for. There's also different swamp layers in there, whether it's herbaceous swamps or, like the woody stem swamps. So whether that's like a cattail marsh or more of like a alder dogwood thicket. So really focus in on that habitat diversity. I think that's a great point, Lake. You kind of want to talk about that edge you're looking at right there.
Yeah, so you hit it right on the head, because, well, as far as like deciduous versus coniferous, where I was looking at that other property on the river country, you don't have a lot of coniferous trees, The habitat diversity found there, and I'll go back to in a second, is mainly like privet hedge, and then different types of like different stage, like age class trees. But this is a perfect one that I marked up for what you're talking about. And so I always go back to this property when someone's asking about trail cameras or just habitat diversity entirely, and edge effect and all that stuff. So if you look right here, you've got deciduous trees right here. You've got a whole block of coniferous trees right there, which a block like that is not uncommon at all in the Southeast. There's plantation pines everywhere. And then you've got this lake right here. And so when you see all this come together, it even makes the shape of a funnel. Like you've got the bigger end up here, and as it tapers down, it pinches right there, which is why we put a trail camera right there. That is about of a natural of a pinch point as you could ever ask for in that spot. And so being able to key in on that type of stuff is absolutely money.
So, like, there's a question from Stephen Wagner here. He gets a bunch of does on camera, but struggling to get bucks on camera. There looks like there's a couple questions kind of in that same realm. From your experience, what do you do to combat that and try to get more bucks when you're just getting does?
See, I would be curious, like when I've dealt with that, because I've definitely dealt with that before. But when I'm getting a lot of does and nothing else, that's when I have a camera set up on some type of food source. And I don't even mean bait or a food plot. I mean, it could be an acorn tree, you know? And so when, and everyone, those spots are always camera hotspots because they're spots that you know you can go to and you're going to get deer. If you put a camera on a water oak tree that's dropping acorns, you're going to get pictures of deer, and you'll probably get a buck, you know. But if you're getting a lot of does, what I've found, you're not going to get as many. But if you key in on these funnels and these pinch points, they're going to be lower numbers, but you're going to have a higher percentage chance of getting a buck. And Jared, I'm sure you have something to throw in there on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you took the words out of my mouth. I'm betting if you're getting a bunch of does, you're likely have your camera on a food source. I mean, eventually where does are, once the rut starts to kick in, bucks won't be far behind. But for all intents and purposes with trail cameras, I'm just going to kind of, Lake, if you want to unshare, I'll share, and I'll zoom up to my property in Wisconsin here,
Sure.
and kind of walk folks through my trail camera strategy and how it changes, from early season into the rut. And so this is a property that I hunt annually in Wisconsin. It's about 400 acres. As you can see, it's just loaded with topography. And really, my trail camera strategy early in the season is I really focus on bedding areas. I want to find where mature bucks are bedding. And so when I'm looking for that, I'm looking at these long drawn out finger ridges. They're going to be all mature deer are going to use as many weather and vegetation and topography features as possible to their advantage. So often they'll bed up on a ridge, putting the thermals in their favor, looking down the hill to really just get that sense of security. And so this camera here is right on a very well known to us buck bedroom. Every single year I get mature bucks on this camera in this bedding area. And when you walk through it, it's very obvious. It's just like super thick, young poplar growth. And there's beds all throughout it, with rubs around. And so that's an area that I'm super keen on early in the season. If I can get a deer on bed to food pattern and I can kill them on opening day in Wisconsin, around that September 15th mark, that's kind of what I'm doing. But then after that early season has kind of faded away and the bed to food is no longer nearly as sure of a bet in daylight hours, I transition these cameras to more of the pinch points and the funnels, sometimes an acorn flat. But like this camera down here, right along the creek bottom, there's basically just a really good creek crossing right here. Whereas the rest of this creek, it's about 10 yards wide. It's not much more than knee deep, but deer are just like us. If they don't have to go knee deep and cross 10 yards of water and they can find a spot that's 3 inches deep, they're going to use it. And that's exactly what this is just a very obvious, easy water crossing. And so I'll typically move my cameras, around right about this time of year, early October, I'll move them to these more pinch points, funnel areas. I really use water sources a lot, especially when it gets a little bit closer to the rut. I find that I have great success capturing mature bucks on water sources. And so that's kind of my strategy for the first two phases, if you will. And then as soon as the rut draws near, I'm moving a lot of those cameras back to food sources, back to where I know there's going to be does, bucks will be following them in there. And then I'm just using that intel throughout the different phases of the deer season on how I'm hunting. I'll hunt a lot more subdued and sit a lot more observation sits for the first few weeks of the season, including right now. But starting in about a week or 10 days, I'm going to get continually more and more aggressive hunting on my trail camera data and just hunting more aggressively. And, a saying that my dad always says was, mature bucks die on marginal wins. And so if I have camera intel that a buck has been daylighting in an area, even if I don't have a perfect wind, especially, late October, early November, I'm going to go in there and I'll hunt a marginal wind, if I'm getting a buck in that spot in daylight and make that move and go hunt them.
There was a question that was submitted that was, I think you could speak to, Jared, because, a lot of your trail cam placements, like you said, are funnels, pinch points, things that are channeling deer. And so someone asked, like, how wide are these pinch points? Which is it's a good question, but it's not a question that I think you can just nail down and go, they're this wide. Like, it can definitely vary,
Yep, 100%. And so like on this property, I'll go back to this creek crossing, like that's something that I would really look for is like creeks or rivers and finding those crossings, because as mentioned, that pinch point is probably going to be about as wide as a deer trail, where that creek or where that river has a shallow riffle and those deer have a really easy time crossing. Whereas like a different, more natural funnel, take it, for instance, look at this topographic line right here. As Lake said, if you kind of like look at this topo map here, it basically creates a funnel going up this ridge. And so like here's the tops of the ridges, this is where it's dropping down. This is going to funnel deer movement as bucks are coming up this ridge. They're going to be cruising for doe bedding areas, particularly in late October and early November, often on these finger ridges. But they're going to use the easiest route of travel to get there. So like even this nuance of a saddle here, this low spot between this high point and that high point, that's something that I would consider kind of a funnel or a pinch. And you can use the line distance tool within the onX app. The distance across this little funnel is 125 yards. Your trail camera is not going to cover 100 yards, obviously. And so it's all very dependent on the area. But if you can find a feature, be that vegetation feature, a terrain feature, a water feature that funnels movement within about 100-yard area, I wouldn't even hesitate to burn 2 or 3 cameras within that 100-yard area if you believe that that is the best spot on your property or on that public ground that you're hunting to find a mature buck. Put 3 cameras in a 100-yard span and see which one does the best. Like that's a strategy that I use all the time when hunting unfamiliar ground, because it's going to get you more familiar a lot faster than if you put 3 cameras dispersed on 400 acres. You're going to learn a lot more about a particular zone if you flood the zone with cameras than spreading them out.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing, like you were talking about, Jared, one of the first things that you said when you were talking about that trail camera that's close to that buck bed, it's like, I guarantee you when you first started hunting there, y'all didn't know that. Y'all figured it out. And then this is the spot to put a camera and this is the spot where to hunt. It's figuring that stuff out, and you start figuring out the different nuances of each property. It's like one of the trail cam markers that I had down there. It's on the end of a dry creek bed, which again, I said I was on the Mississippi River. There's a lot of flooding and a lot of water fluctuation. So there's always travel through there. But as the winter gets forward, or if we have a lot of rain, that creek bed gets more full, and that becomes a lot heavier of a pinch, especially during the rut. There's bedding to the north, there's food plots to the south, there's bucks crossing at the edge of that thing, constantly trying to find does. And that's something that we learned from hunting there for 6 or 7 years.
And I think that's a great point. I often, 100% of the time, if I'm hunting public grounds, if I'm on private ground, it's far less often. But if I am not 100% confident in the spot that I am hunting, I'll often do an observation sit, and I'll have trail cameras in my backpack that after that observation sit, I'll immediately go hang a trail camera based off what I had seen on that sit, provided that I saw something. So, if you're able to, and of course it doesn't need to be a cell camera. I mean, shoot, I run plenty of $70, camo fire bargain bin trail cameras. I love my cell cameras a heck of a lot more than the bargain bin ones. But at the end of the day, as far as just a camera to throw in your pack and always have at your disposal, I'd highly recommend carrying one around on your hunts.
Yeah. Yeah, that brings me to, so I'm looking at these. Someone asked Jared, said basically kind of what you were just touching on. Said, how do you guys weigh boots on the ground and conventional cameras versus newer cameras communicating data with your phone? Which what he's getting at is, having to go and check the cameras, change the battery.
Yep.
So I 100% get that question. To me, like, cell cameras are hugely helpful. Like you said, I still run traditional cameras because they work and I still have them, so why not run them? But I definitely, from like just a pressure put on the wood standpoint, cell cams are so incredible because it limits the amount of human pressure you have to put on those woods, which is huge.
Not to mention, it's like the most exciting thing that you can have at your disposal as soon as you wake up every morning. But yeah, and there's a couple other questions in here, like how often will you check your trail camera card, particularly if you're hunting on public. So a couple things I always do with trail cameras: go on Amazon and buy yourself an $8 iOS or Android to SD card adapter. I carry 2 of them in my bino harness just because sometimes they don't work all that well. And for $8, I always have them in my pack. That way I can quick pull out the card when I'm on my way in or on the way out of a stand, quick check that camera, slip the card back in. The other thing you can do is go spend $15 and buy a couple 4 gigabyte SD cards that you can just throw in your pack. That way you can always be swapping SD cards every single time that you go in, whether it's to hunt or to scout. But as far as a concise answer, how often do you check your cards? I'm shooting for about once every 7 to 10 days for the most part. And if I'm going in there to hunt or to scout, there is a 100% chance I am checking my camera when I do that.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you're in there already, why not check the camera? I mean, it makes sense to do it. Another question that we got, this is a tough one. What if your property has no water sources and all acorn production is non-existent due to a dry summer? That's a tough situation. There's no doubt about that. I guess that's not ideal,
Nope.
Don't have water sources and no acorns. The question there, I mean, I feel like we would have to have, for that one, we would have to have all the factors on the table. Like, do you have anything else on the property that is going to make a deer want to be there? Do you have food plots? Anything? Do you have bedding areas? Because if both the like water sources and acorns are gone, then you'd have to key in on another factor for a deer to be there. That's about the only way I can go with it.
Yeah, on that property, you're going to probably have some tough sledding until the rut comes around, provided that you have some does. Couple quick ones. Camera quantities. How many is too many, Lake?
There's no such thing. That's
many
correct. As your imagination can hold.
As many as your wife will allow you to buy. What size SD cards? Typically, I don't have a problem running 4 gigabyte or 8 gigabytes if I'm just doing photos. I really love a camera that does the hybrid mode that records a video and a photo, at which point I really prefer to have a 16 or a 32 gigabyte. But shoot, for all intents and purposes, 8 gigs is about all the more you need.
Yeah, 8 gigs tends to be the happy medium for sure.
What's another one here for you? Oh, this is one that Lake, you and I kind of talked about when we were prepping for this. Thoughts on, white flash or low glow or flash cameras? Do they have an effect on mature bucks? Do you find that mature bucks will avoid a particular camera set? What are your thoughts there in the South?
I mean, I have nothing to base this off of except for my own experience. I 100% think a standard white flash has some effect. Um, I tend to lean towards more the low glow or the no glow. I mean, because we've all seen pictures of a white flash camera with the deer just looking, dead at it. And I'm like, that has to have, and he still comes there, because you have bait there, an acre tree, whatever. But if I have my rathers, I'm going with a low glow or a no glow camera. I just think, why not? If I can
Yeah.
put that in my advantage, why not?
I'm not the Mississippi State Deer Lab, but in my experience, particularly on an Iowa farm that I'm able to hunt, is I mean, we got rid of all of our flash cameras because exactly like you said, when you get a flash at night, that buck would be sitting there and just like petrified looking at the camera. And we just, it was anecdotal, of course, but we were like, man, we seem to be getting less bucks on that camera with the flash than the infrared cameras. And so we ditched all of our flash cameras. And I don't think I've ran a true flash camera for, I don't know, 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think you're better off. I don't know if it's like a huge factor, but it definitely helps as far as I'm concerned.
Here's one from Todd Johnson. What direction would you point your camera? If you can point your camera north, point it north, because you're going to have far less sun exposure on, those limbs, on that grass. You're going to get less of them bogus photos of nothing. That tip was brought to me by a Western hunter a couple of years back, and I can't tell you how much of a difference it has made pointing your cameras to the north versus pointing them right directly to the south or straight east into the rising sun. If you can avoid sunny spots where your camera is overlooking, you'll get a lot less photos of nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Should I place the majority of my cams elevated or more at 3 feet or so off the ground? I've seen that, like they have those deals now where you can angle or you can put it high and angle the camera downward. I've never done that personally. I'm not saying it won't work. I just typically kind of go standard height and around the tree.
I've done that a bunch on public land just because I feel like I can typically just bring one climbing stick. And then if I hang my camera, well above the average guy's height, I just feel as though there's a less likelihood of them seeing it and picking off my camera. But I mean, as far as from a deer perspective, I don't give it any thought as far as a deer keying in on my camera. But from a not get my camera stolen on public, I definitely hang them high.
Yeah, no one can blame you there. Let's go to another one here. Well, this one's interesting. If your property has standing corn until December, how often do you think they will use that as their bedding, or do they even use that for bedding?
I hunt around a lot of corn. That Iowa property that I just referenced is a sea of corn. And it is absolutely astounding the difference in deer movement that you see when the sea of corn comes down versus when it is up. I know there's some controversy out there that some folks claim that deer will just live in a cornfield until the cornfield comes down. Some people claim that deer don't bed in cornfields. From my personal experience, if that corn is up and there is still food on those ears and it's not all thrashed by the deer being in there all summer and early fall, those deer won't leave that corn if they don't have to. So I'd be begging that farmer to bring it down.
Yeah. Like I said, you definitely, Jared, have more experience around, large agricultural cornfields than I do, but what experience I do have, I 100% agree. Yeah.
So here's one for you, Lake. Photo versus video on your trail cameras. What's your preference and why?
I typically just stick to photo. If I have to choose one, I stick to photo. Strictly because I mean it's like it's a memory thing or an SD card thing. It seems to burn up less battery. Not to say I've found myself more often than not, if it's a spot where I know, like if I have a camera and I've gotten a certain buck in there a couple times, I'll turn that camera on hybrid just because I want to get a video of him. But it's kind of like if I have a default setting, it's going to just be on photo.
Yeah. So I'm with you. And unfortunately, it's purely because of cell cams. They aren't, at least no cell cam I've used sends videos to my phone. And B, my little SD card adapter doesn't, the video format does not pop up on my phone when I plug my SD card into the adapter. But that said, I would 100% prefer to have videos. Mike and Sean over at Heartland Bowhunter, those guys run video on pretty much all of their cameras talking to them. And the reason they do so is you get so much more insight as to what that buck is doing from a 15-second video than a still image. Sometimes you're able to see their direction of travel for a good 15 yards, or you're able to see how they're interacting with different bucks in the area. If they're super aggressive and ears are pinned back, maybe next sit you go out there with rattling antlers. So I would say if you can and you have the ability to run your cameras on video and bring SD cards out to throw them in your computer and monitor that, put them on video. But like you, Lake, I'm running a lot of photos.
Yeah. For, like I said, it's kind of a hodgepodge of different reasons. This is an interesting one. If you get a deer, or hang on, if you get 2 or more deer on cameras, I guess, multiple bucks, are you ever able to backtrack where they're bedding at or their feeding areas? I guess, yes, sometimes. It depends. Where the camera is, what I can see. A lot of times it's an educated guess, or if I've been hunting the property a long time, I can kind of go, hey, that deer came from whichever spot, but not all the time. But you definitely can in some instances, for sure.
Yeah. And I would say, if you got bucks on camera that you're interested in shooting, and you're getting them 20 minutes after dark or an hour after dark, the only way to get something different is experimenting with those cameras. Obviously it's hard to move a camera that's getting you pictures of mature bucks. But I would say if you got that buck 20 minutes after dark, move it a couple 100 yards in the direction that he was coming from into a likely bedding area, or, maybe 100 yards the other direction. If you got him early in the morning and you think he's heading out to a feeding area, a field or a food plot or something like that, move those cameras around. And again, that kind of goes back into putting it on video mode and just getting a little bit more insight as to what that deer is doing.
Sure. I think kind of what both of us are edging towards, it's like the biggest takeaway I can give somebody from this whole thing is it's perfectly good and okay to have your spots where you always put a trail camera, like Jared, your spot in the buck bed, have your camera there. Awesome. You need one there. However, find a happy medium where you're not just having these same number of cameras in the same spot year after year. Don't be scared to move them around. And here's the thing, if you move in one spot and you don't get any pictures of anything, it's okay. Move it again. It's like trial and error. You would be shocked at the things that you could pick up that you realize you've been missing this whole time, just from getting a little creative out there.
And that's the funnest part of trail cameras, which I'm going to go back to the Hunt app here and show you a quick, really useful feature that I use all the time. As I told you guys, I hunt this Wisconsin property every year, but I live out here in Montana. And so this is actually a good buddies of mine's property. And so what we do is we actually have, so here I have all of my trail cameras in a folder, and I'll just quickly delete this folder and show you guys how to do that in a real quick fashion. And so I have my trail cameras here. And so what you can do is if you click this My Content tab, it looks pretty much the same on the phone app as it does desktop. You can create a new folder, and I'll just call it Wisconsin Trail Cams, if I can spell. Save that. And so then you can click that folder and click this Add Content. And so from there, I have only list content visible on screen selected here. And I'm just going to select all, and I'm going to put that in a folder. And then from there, I can share that. So I'm going to, on your phone app, it's a lot more seamless. You can just quickly text it, email it, however you want to. But if you did it on your desktop, you could copy that link and send it in an email or whatever you wanted to. But my good buddy Nate, I constantly send him waypoints of like, hey dude, like I've been looking at the map. I think you should move a trail camera over here, or do this or do that. And so if you have hunting buddies, that is a great way to collaborate with one another with your trail cameras. And the beauty of it is let's say that let's say Lake and I were hunting this piece of property, and Lake was up there next week, and I wanted him to move this P2 oak flat camera. What I can do is I can just simply edit this camera and say, hey, I want you to move it way back here on the corner of our property, right off that food source. If I change the location of that waypoint, that location in the shared folder is going to change on Lake's map too. So when I say, hey, go put the trail camera in the new P2 oak flat location, he'll have an exact location of where I want that trail camera, even though he never went in and changed anything on his onX. All I did was change where the waypoint was in my shared folder, and that's going to update for him. That way you and your hunting partners can always stay on the same page, whether you're moving trail cameras, moving tree stands, you can share that stuff. And it just makes hunting with other people so much easier.
Yeah, even that, like I'll echo that, Jared, on like down here, there's a lot of deer camps and leases and stuff like that. If you're set up on a folder system like that, like I don't know if this ever happens up there, but I know it happens down here all the time. You'll have somebody in the same deer camp or whatever, and they'll go into a spot and they'll move a camera and they won't tell anybody, and they don't have what you just talked about showed up. And so you'll end up having, you'd say, I think there's a camera in this oak flat, and I go in there, I look for it, it's not there. And then if I'm not sure where it was to begin with, I tromp all around there trying to find it. And then what have I done? I've accomplished nothing but just leave a lot of scent all around the woods. Whereas if you have that set up, it's there, it's not there. It can save you a lot of time and effort and save you from putting, unnecessary pressure on those woods.
100%. Interesting question from Todd Johnson here, which I think a lot of people might be wondering the same thing. So Lake, for you personally down in Mississippi, from today, October 11th through, let's just call it, Christmas, let's say you're going to move your trail cameras 3 times. You're going to move them tomorrow. You're going to move them once in November and once in December. What are you kind of focusing on as that time and season shifts in your area in the South?
100%. Yeah. So there are, like the properties that I hunt, there are some cameras that I will never move. Like if there's some that will be there the entire year pretty much. But am I going to move cameras like that throughout the season? 100%. If I'm moving them tomorrow, it's still going to be on food patterns. Like down here, we still have some swamp chestnuts and water oaks that are just now starting to drop. And so as those come in and there's different trees getting hot and dropping, I'm moving cameras there. November is kind of like down here. November is kind of our lull time. And so if there's some food sources that are still hot, I'll keep them there. I'll probably kind of get close to bedding during that time. During the rut, I'm going to have cameras on food sources. If I have food plots, destination food sources, because you'll catch bucks coming out there because those will be out there. But I'm going to be hammering the travel routes, the funnels, the pinch points during a rut. That's absolutely crucial. And like even during that time, if I get 1 picture to 20 pictures a day, I'm still plenty stoked. I'm not trying to, like this time of year on the food sources, it's going to be your more high volume picture days, but during the rut, everything's sporadic. But that's what I would do as far as where I move them.
Right on. And from like a upper Midwest perspective, just because Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa is kind of my stomping ground for whitetails. Right now, if I'm moving cameras, I'm really going to focus on white oaks and really getting as close to a bedroom as possible. No secret that this time of year can be really hard to locate, let alone harvest a mature buck. They're not moving that far in daylight. So I'd really be focusing on finding those hot white oak trees and then the closest bedding areas to them and kind of focusing there. But then pretty quick here, probably the week before Halloween, I really find that scrapes just start to blow up the woods right around, maybe that October 22nd, 25th time period. they just start popping up everywhere. And so I'll really start to move my cameras to those scrapes as bucks are hitting them about daily. And you really just get a great inventory of the different bucks that are coming through. And I'll also put some cameras, in that early pre-rut time frame, on those pinch points and funnel areas, creek crossings, or just major highway travel corridors from, a bedding area to a destination food source. And then as kind of the rut wanes out, then I'm really heavy back on that high calorie, high energy food. Once that snow starts falling, those temps really start dropping. Cornfields, if somehow there's still a standing bean field, or maybe you have a really good green brassica food plot, that's kind of how I would shift my trail cameras over the next couple months.
Mm-hmm. I have one question that I want to hit on, because he spoke to something that I've dealt with directly. Tim Sanders, he said, I hunt public swamps in Louisiana quite a bit. Many areas, there's standing water for miles without high ground. What would the best strategy be for trail cameras? I can speak to this directly, because like that first property that I was showing, river country, delta, dealing with fluctuating water levels, high water all the time. It can be a pain dealing with that, no doubt about it. But as far as where to put a trail camera and how to find deer in that, those can be, like I said, it takes effort, because sometimes it requires spending a lot of time finding these certain things or certain features to look for. But water is going to, especially fluctuating in high water, is going to heavily affect deer movement. It's going to channel deer movement. And so what you can find, like the best one, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's the more difficult one to find, but like at Cottonmouth, for instance, we had several different creeks and tributaries running through there. And so if you had multiples of those, like if I had two paralleling creek systems running together and both of them get outside their banks and that water comes up, you get the pinch point of all pinch points. And so sometimes we found those, and I mean, it would be stupid the amount of deer traffic coming through there. Also, as that water recedes or comes up, it is going to change that deer travel. It's going to open up different food sources. Sometimes even, man, during the summertime, like if you have, this happens a lot down there where you're at. Now, if you have a lot of high water during the summer, even into the early fall when the season opens, if that water recedes, there's suppressed vegetation under there. If you have the canopy open enough to where that sunlight hits it, that water recedes, you'll have all this fresh, tender growth pop up out of nowhere, and those deer will go crazy eating on it because it's new food source. And so, like I said, high water and fluctuating water can be difficult, but you can 100% get on deer doing that.
Sounds like a spot that you just got to go to a lot if you're going to have that type of fluctuations in water, especially if it's like a levee dam system. Yeah, those are going to be tough spots to hunt. You gotta really be in tune with the changes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of questions. I've seen like 3 of them now on like how many seconds on your delay from one photo to the next, or one guy's camera only does a minimum of 5-second delay. And so one thing that I've found to get just higher odds of getting a good photo, this might be a little bit abstract to explain, but so if you have a tree here and the trail is running in front of the tree that you want to put your camera on, instead of putting your camera at like a 90-degree perpendicular angle to that trail, where you only have a short window for your trail camera to trigger, face that camera either up or down the trail so you get the deer approaching you head on or walking more almost directly away from you, because that will give your camera more time to react to that deer movement. You'll have that deer in the frame longer as it's walking towards you or away from you. So just avoid those perpendicular situations where the deer is going to be right in front of the camera broadside. Try to get them coming to you or going away from you, and that should help a little bit.
Yeah.
And I would say if I can, I'm going to set my trigger delay as low as possible. Like, give me all of the photos.
Yeah. That's what I would say. There definitely is a game you have to play with trigger delay. Like if I'm on a heavy food source, like my trigger delay is probably not going to be that low because I will burn through battery and data real quick. But if I'm if I'm putting my camera in one of those corridors, pinch points like we talked about, it is going on the lowest trigger setting possible.
And Sean Miller brings up a real good point here. He says, I'd like to point out that getting no pictures is also good intel. Get out of there. Like, that's well summed up, you know, like
Fair point.
it is good intel. And like, that's something, don't sit there and him and haw over, oh man, like, are they going to show up? Are they going to show up? Move the camera, you know, move it for a week and see if you get something else somewhere. Because yeah, Sean's totally right. No intel is still good intel.
That's correct. I would say he's right about that.
Ooh, I like this one that just came in the chat. How do you use past year's photos to help you this year?
Yeah, that is good. It depends. I mean, like, obviously, like, the longer you get to hunt a property, the more history you build there. So, I mean, a lot of times, like, I'd catalog pictures all the time, especially if it's a spot that's new to me. And then you can kind of have a reference point to go back to and say, you know, this, you know, deer were here last year. It can even, on a more fine-tuned scale, can give you like hey, I've been hanging this camera on this tree in this spot for so long, but I'm going to keep it in the same area, but I'm moving it to a different tree. Just because if you're noticing the deer always coming from coming from the same direction, maybe you want to get tighter to that sort of thing.
And something that I do, I've been a little bit lazy with it in the last year or two, but I certainly was very much into keeping Excel spreadsheets. And, you know, just like most folks on private properties that I get to hunt year over year, I, you know, have ended up naming deer and keeping track of them as 2.5-year-olds all the way up. You know, there was one deer, I think I had 7.5 years of history with him before he ever disappeared on me. Never did get an arrow in him. But I mean, I'd get pretty nerdy in an Excel spreadsheet. You know, the deer that I hunted for 7.5 years, we named him Bowser, you know, after the Mario Kart character. He was just stout. And I mean, I had Excel spreadsheets of when we got photos of them in October, what the wind direction was when we got photos of them, what time it was at, and so on and so forth. And I had like a couple years worth of hundreds of photos of this deer, and just trying to put together the pieces of the pie to be in the right spot at the right time, which with that deer, it didn't end up ultimately helping me, but I have had that data, you know, really come in handy where it's like, okay, last year in mid-October, I had this buck daylight 3 times in the span of 6 days between October 15th and October 30th. Like, that is absolutely intel that I will hunt without a doubt the following year if I'm interested in killing that same buck.
100%. Too bad we post some of the pictures that we have. I agree with that. I would love to see posted some of the pictures.
We actually talked about that as we were kicking around waiting for this thing to start. It's like, man, we wish that folks could post photos in the chat so we could see all these trail camera photos. But we got about 10 minutes here that Lake and I will continue to answer questions, but we're going to throw links in the chat and the Q&A right now for our gear giveaways. So as soon as you see that link pop up in there, click on that link, go fill it out with, you know, your name and address, get entered for the giveaway. It'll only be open here tonight for the folks in this webinar. So I see the giveaway link just got posted in the chat. Go click on that, go fill it out. Rustin Johnson asks, to show or not to show trail camera pics of giants?
Well, it depends. Like, it depends, right? Like, you can't, like, I can't just go, yes, you should do that. You know,
well, I know Rustin, and I know the giants he has on cameras. And if you guys aren't already following Hunt United on all social platforms, those dudes run more trail cameras than anybody I know, and they get more pictures of giant mature bucks on Arkansas and Kansas public land than anybody I've ever come across. So yeah, Rustin, throw your photos out there for everyone to see.
He probably could be running this masterclass if he wanted to. He knows
he absolutely could be.
Oh,
what else do we got here for questions? Scent control hanging cameras. Do you know, are you using rain to your advantage? Are you paying much attention to it? Wearing rubber boots? What are you doing there, Lake?
If I rubber boots for sure, like rubber boots for sure. One thing that that we talked about this at length before, it's interesting, especially in terms of if you're going to a spot that, like, you know where the food source is, you know where the deer are coming from, you know where the bedding area is per se. Like, I'm not gonna just willy-nilly walk in to switch a card out, change batteries if I know the wind is absolutely awful. For, if I know I'm about to blow my scent right into a bedding area, I'm not going in there, because a lot of folks don't even think about that. But at that point, you might as well be hunting on a wrong wind. I mean, you're blowing right up into that bedding. And so I do think about scent control a lot. I mean, it's kind of hard not to, especially if you're, trying to get keyed into a buck and you're starting to put, like you said, starting to put those pieces together to where you kind of know where he's at. 100% give some attention to scent control and what the wind is when you're doing that.
Yep, hard to beat a deer's nose. Brady Mulroy, do you worry about getting too close to a buck bedroom? Is this a good time to use cell cameras? 100%. If you have that onX Elite membership, go grab a Bushnell cell camera at 25% off with 3 months of free data. Cell cams are literally created for putting in those areas that you don't want to go in there and disturb frequently, particularly buck bedrooms, or those high risk areas where if you boot a mature buck once, you might be okay. You boot a mature buck twice, that's not good. So using cell cameras, I find paramount in those type of situations.
100%. I mean, because again, that's kind of the beauty of the whole cell cam thing. And then it's like, I've been lucky enough to run cell cams for enough time now. I think about some of those ones that we have out that are close to a bedding area and we know it's close. I'm like, man, I would be stressed to the gills if I knew I had to go in there and change a card out.
Yep.
I might wait till it's like a monsoon rainstorm before I did it.
Yep. Here's one from Jeffrey Reich. What can you do if you're getting one mature-ish deer a week across a farm, but does daily? I think you're doing pretty good, Jeff. There's probably about one mature buck for every 30 does, 40 does. Again, I don't work at the old MSU deer lab, but I think you're doing just fine if you're getting mature bucks every week. Keep on keeping on. And if you're getting cameras that aren't getting any mature bucks and just getting does, move those around, go experiment.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like, if you have the inventory to do so, leave that one camera where it is and then put some other ones elsewhere and see if you have any more bucks. But one mature buck is not a bad bet.
Oh, all right. We're going to answer a couple more. I'll make one more reminder here in the chat. Go click on that giveaway link. We're going to post it again right now. Get entered. And Carlos Portillo asks a good question that a ton of people ask. What batteries do you run, Lake? And do you find that something lithium with Energizer is better than the cheap Rayovacs? What are you doing?
3,000%. When we started seeing the benefits of not having to go in there all the time with cell cams, we started using Energizer lithiums, and that's like a set it and forget it kind of thing. I mean, like, it just gives you more ability to stay the heck out of there. So yeah, I'm Energizer lithiums do best for us, but some kind of lithium battery.
I've ran the test between the old Amazon Basics versus the Energizer lithiums. I just did it this summer in my yard with those Bushnell Cellucors, and it was pretty astounding how quickly the Amazon Basics batteries ran out in comparison to the Energizer lithium. I mean, it was less than half the battery life. So though it's another $10 for the same amount of batteries, it's a worthy $10.
Mm-hmm. I think, man, we had those Energizer lithiums in Cellucors on food sources. Granted, I mean, it was like a 15, 20-second trigger speed, but I mean, we could go months without having to worry about battery life, and that's huge.
Todd Johnson, I think that's a great idea for our next elite benefit. I'll be sure to slide into those Energizer lithium battery DMs here and see what we can do about some bulk batteries. Yeah. All right, we're going to answer one more question here. Is Jimmy Primos the luckiest hunter you've ever hunted with, Lake?
Yeah, he is. I'll make this a super short story. Actually, remember that first camera location. I showed y'all the land between the lakes. One time, Will Primos shot at a buck he ended up being 160 something inch deer, shot at a buck with his bow, missed him. The deer ran north to that large ag field, and Jimmy killed him about probably 45 minutes later. So that is just one of the many anecdotes where I could share that, yes, I do believe Jimmy Primos to be the luckiest hunter I've ever been around.
Awesome. Well, everyone, really appreciate you guys coming out. As always, if you guys ever have questions for us here at onX as it pertains to the onX Hunt app, help at onxmaps.com is the email address for our fully staffed customer support team. We got over 30 agents here in Montana. 406-540-1600 is the customer support line if you ever need anything with the app. And we have a block on our website for all of our future masterclasses. So if you want to hear myself or Lake talk about some whitetail hunting in the future, or our buddies, Dylan talking about draw odds, if you want to come out west, I certainly encourage you to continue to tune into these masterclasses. We want to help you guys be more successful in the field, because at the end of the day, that is the goal of the onX Hunt app, is to help put you guys in spots to have more opportunities. So best of luck this fall, all. Shoot some mature bucks, shoot straight out there, and appreciate you guys coming out.
For sure. Thanks, guys.